Rich, I think we could definitely just get pretty much the highlights. See that a lot.
Last year it was conceptualized a bit as something that would be broadly informative. And we put it on the website, and I tried to foreground it as news, and we just didn't get the feedback that would suggest that it was creating that engaged learning experience. So I'm taking it.
was like super helpful for my learning, and that the explanations of what is the tax levy and what is the levy limit, various conceptual things that I was still learning about and am still learning about. This is a good reference for me, and I would like to see, I'd like to maybe talk with you, Steve, about whether we should take some of that explanatory material and preserve it in a different way that's available to the public, because I think that the audience for that educational material is broader than just these two committees.
Yeah, like a
Right.
financial primer was the only thing I could
Right.
think of,
It's-
like,
you know,
something
they
be
were-
good reading for somebody that came on finance committee, for
Somebody who wants
instance.
to know more
or-
about how things work, and that's one of the ways that they learn. It's really good information, and it's very nicely explained and written. But I think that for our purposes, the budget outlook that you wrote in the message to the department chairs summarized a lot of the kind of big ideas quite effectively. And then my other comment was that there's a part of me that wants to see notable risks balanced out by any notable opportunities. If there's a way to think in terms of that language, like, I like knowing what the risks are, but I also like knowing that there might be unusual or unique opportunities in the community.
Right.
And I'll just echo that last comment about opportunities, that when I look at it, I also like the document because I think it reflects you, Steve, and your work, and I think of you also as a creative and an optimistic person. And so that opportunities piece was also, I saw an opportunity, because I know your thinking's there too.
Yeah.
Laying down some of your, I know you always are in service to the select board and the town, but your iron's in the fire, so laying down some of those pieces for us to think about is good.
Okay. Thank you for both.
So,
Okay. I feel like this gives me something chewy. Anyone else?
this panel that's looking at
Review of the current year is not as important because in most cases, you're saying this is much the way we had expected. If there is something unusual that affects the current year, it's worth mentioning, but I think it's more of a forward-looking one. If the separation of financial information from year-specific information, that separation can be done, it may shrink the portion that is just financial planning. And that, I think the suggestions you heard, less of a repetitive commentary and more semantic.
Yeah. Great.
I think it's a useful report because it gives us a longer view, a broader view than this
Okay. That's great. That's very helpful, and I'll just note that there are some excellent FAQs on sort of major financial concepts, municipal finance concepts that have been put together by other communities, and so I tried to grab the ones that were the most relevant to that particular narrative, but we might be able to just look at some models, and I'll talk with you, Jen, if you're up for it, and we'll identify which we think are like the big ones that people need easy access to as educational tools, and even at town meeting.
Great.
Thank you all.
Could I ask that I'd like to make a motion to close the capital improvements meeting.
Sure.
So move. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right.
Do you mind if I stay for a bit?
No.
Or is that
Enjoy the finance
dismissal?
committee.
I
Don't tempt him.
I invited Josh to
Please.
stay on because the next topic also touched on capital improvements as well. So
Oh,
I
okay.
felt like,
Sure,
it
sure.
probably might be of interest to him, but now you're just a special.
Just in case, just get unpaid whenever.
Right, so, a couple of meetings ago, Mr. Widmer asked if we could talk about some broader topics and philosophical topics, and we put it on our agenda, and he sent us a letter. And, Mr. Widmer's gonna lead this part of the discussion, but we agreed that we are gonna try to keep this part.
I read this letter, I think it starts from, my thinking on this letter starts from three different places. One is wanting us to be a strong or useful financing. So like, how can we be most useful? And also from having, done a few years of learning here and wanting to ask some, and having some questions come up time and again every time we vote to approve another repair on the Shea Theater. It's like, how are we tracking this? When are we gaining ground on this kind of activity? So just wondering about what the finance committee does, and then I had specific thoughts about aspects of the way that our town is working, and that we could, as a committee, consider whether that is work that we can do to support the select board and support the town. So it came down to, I don't think I need to, if you read the letter, then you read the letter, but if you didn't, it comes down to 4 or 6 discussion points, which I think any one of them would be sufficient to talk about at length as a group, and I'm not proposing that unless there's one that really grabs us. But I'm wondering whether or not there's 1 or 2 or 3 of these issues that other people at the table feel strongly about, and that it'll help guide our decisions as a finance committee and make us more effective by virtue of us making better decisions, but also using less time to make those decisions. So the first suggestion was a discussion of capital project funding. We just did a bit of that in the previous discussion. It seems to me that every year we have, you guys describe strategic and incremental, but it's also kind of unplanned. I know it's planned within the year it's planned, or within its 2-year, or that's too many capital articles this year, we better save this one for next year. But it seems like we're always catching up on that. So I wondered if there was a different approach. When is the capital improvements fund large enough to operate out of? Is that ever achieved?
I think it's been said that it's not really a reality. You could have probably twice what they're gonna get for this year, and there's still not enough to do what needs to be
It's
done.
unlimited. So any one of these, so I don't know, maybe someone else has a suggestion, because any one of these topics could take up the whole. So do you have a suggestion about like how to ask the group whether to focus on these things, or else, I could
Let me
withdraw?
just, when you look at capital improvements, it's the way that bylaw is written. It's like the DPW knows 10 years from now it needs a new truck, new loader. We can go to DPW and they can give us for the next 15 years what they need.
We've got that
We have that, that's all set.
We had that already.
for every department. that
Every
they gave
department.
us.
So a lot of the stuff that you just suggested is already in
We're
play.
enacting it.
It's actually in play.
The one thing we might want to think about is, with our building inventory, is doing an annual building assessment. So we build a history, and maybe it's a generic form. It starts at the foundation and works its way up, and just lists different things that builders would be more aware of them, But I could think of like just foundation condition and, and the general condition in the basement and any potential mold and boilers and
Sure, structural
water
members
heaters and
sure,
infrastructure. And it may be redundant, but maybe if we got into a discipline of every year for each of our town-owned buildings, having somebody, a department head or somebody on our maintenance team, review that and fill it out every year. So now we could start to build, because the first year it's gonna say Shea Theater, next year it's gonna say new roof. The year after it should say 1-year-old roof. And those are the things that might start to then show us things that help you guys on the capital, like look at it and say, okay, this is our inventory. And it might help us project, because Richard is absolutely right. These things don't typically happen overnight. That building, if somebody was paying attention to these roofs, they would have seen 10 years ago that this roof is going to fail in 5 years. It's pretty easy to see. And so if you focus on it rather than just see it but ignore it, and that's what's been happening, I think, the personal opinion.
Like almost like a standardized, we'll call it a report card, but, you're looking at these basic things for basically all buildings.
Yeah.
Some of them might have
So we have
amenities,
developed,
others don't.
we have this out here.
Right, I don't want to discredit, you guys are doing fantastic.
No, I'm not trying to.
We're not
I'm just
discrediting
saying,
anything.
That's not-
a way to raise awareness is what I'm saying.
What it is that for many different reasons over the years, these buildings were just, and a lot of other things in town, were just neglected, not to the fault that the town didn't want to do it. Funding wasn't there for many different reasons.
We do now have implemented an evaluation form and system
Oh, great.
for each building. I have some copies.
Oh, good. I was not aware of that. That's great.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear.
Fantastic.
That's great.
And you've done that for other buildings, or you're just starting to do them now?
We've got the majority of the buildings.
Yeah.
done.
The building maintenance staff did them. There are some buildings that they didn't do. They didn't do the Shea or the Colley or the Central Street School, for example. All right? How many of you knew that we owned that?
I did.
Yeah.
Let's start.
And we've got some emergent issues there.
Yes.
But we had, the building staff did it. We also we gave people who inhabit or are responsible for those buildings the opportunity also to identify and rate those. So that, because sometimes what building staff don't see, people who work in the buildings do see. So, call it Generation 1, right? Because it was a new thing that we developed this year.
That's great, and then if you could keep that
Right.
populating year
Yeah,
over
we've
year.
thrown
you start
around
to
the
get-
idea of developing a file for each building with
Yeah,
tracking tracking the improvements and the upgrades and the conditions year to year
You
within.
think any of that would be in the, annual sort of, what you present to us for your,
In the report,
Yeah, the
I can put
report.
whatever you guys want. Okay.
or anything of a necessary note? Like
How
you
much
said,
paper do you want in your life?
Yeah, I think maybe it goes on the website,
Yeah.
not
Oh,
necessarily in the.
yeah, we just,
Absolutely.
this idea has just been kind of tossed around mostly by myself. I haven't gotten any negative or positive feedback from it, from other
I like
members.
the idea, and I think then you can start to build a database.
A database for each.
Even if you were just
building.
assign a value, a number, numerical value
Sure.
to the things,
Yeah,
then that becomes easy for people to say.
we could hold it in the capital improvements committee for now, but it could be distributed.
I think it's another thing we
Probably
have
should
to,
not have adjourned the capital improvements committee meeting.
I think another thing we have to look
I
at,
don't think Josh should next fit in it.
Anyway, Greg,
Move
you
to
wanna go?
reopen
'Cause I
the
feel
capital
like-
improvements committee?
No,
yeah.
Greg, I want you to say what you
So,
wanted to say.
In reference to what you brought up and the different things, 4 years ago, I think it was, or 3 years ago, Karen? 4 years ago maybe, that Frank presented kind of the town overview of how we're going to be managing our finances, basically our financial management report, where certain percentages of our dollars go in certain places. That includes capital improvements, includes everything else. So we look at those things, not only for a factor for the bond ratings, to make sure that we're fiscally responsible and everything else, but also as a guideline for our committee and what we do with the monies. And if there is a need for us to shift our priorities, that shift in priorities should be communicated through either the town meeting or through other ones to Steve, the select board, and say, we want to allocate more funds as a percentage of before or after these funds are allocated to capital improvements, to education, to parks and recs. That's where all that comes from. And then the way that I look at this is I would love to be able to stand here and say, you know what, that money, I don't want that money to go there, I want that money to go there. But that's not my job here, that's not my role here on the finance committee. what we look at is, all the buildings and everything else, and through the years I've been doing this, every year when stuff comes before the capital improvements or the finance committee, there is never enough. It's just never enough. So what we try to do, and what Steve tries to do, and the select board try to do at the best of their abilities, is to take the funds we have available, allocate them responsibility, and strategically plan on how to use those funds, the best way we can. We don't come across a lot of people like Josh and other people that are on these boards that'll sit there and say, we're gonna put these plans together. That's all volunteer work. That's really good stuff. But in reality, Steve doesn't have the budget, the town doesn't have the budget to produce those types of reports, to maintain those types of reports, to do all those things. So it really takes a group of people that are committed to doing it. So I think when you're looking at this broad spectrum of what the finance committee can do and what we want to be able to allocate, is look at specifically how we're allocating those funds. So if this capital improvements and maintaining these buildings and getting them up to stuff is our number one priority, then, we should tell them, maybe we need to put another couple percentages out there, in that pool of money, and know that that's where that's gonna go.
Great.
So it's
But
just a matter of allocation and priorities.
Right, but in one hand, I just heard you say that you're not here to do that, and then I just heard you say we are.
Well, no, as an individual, not as a committee.
Right,
As an
and that's what I'm
individual.
looking for, is consensus around and alignment around some of these ideas. And I understand everything about what you said, and I understood that 2 years ago when I came onto the committee. But I just want us to consider some of these ideas that have come forward over the past 2 years. So that was the first idea on capital improvements, that I thought that I see the great work that's happening there. It's also important to me. It is a great value that a person like Josh puts together a great plan like that. And if a person like Josh is in our house right now, then, and he's great, well then how can we best provide him with the assets, the resources to do good work? That's what I'm looking for. Is like, I'm not saying spend less, I'm saying how can we spend it so that we're not always told, oh shoot, it's leaking. We can't not approve this fund. How can we spend money before it's leaking?
So I guess where I come from on this is that the finance committee's job is to evaluate plans that are brought to us. And so if the capital improvements committee needs more resources in order to do its work, they are gonna come to us with a plan, and we're gonna evaluate that plan. And so, I'll finish quickly, I can tell that you would like to talk. But as an appointed committee, we weren't elected to reflect the will of the town. Our job is really to be responsible for the town's financial resources. And sometimes the responsible decision is not the popular decision. And so I appreciate your giving us the opportunity to think about this more deeply today. The outcome of my thinking is that I really believe that the separation of power is important here, and that I don't think that the finance committee should be very involved in developing visions or plans, because it feels like we're the ones who are holding the purse strings. And that doesn't feel ethical to me.
There are planning commissions and conservation commissions and CIC organizations that generate that rather than us.
So I personally support a lot of these ideas, but I want to see them come to us from the grassroots up, or from the commissions that are responsible for that work, not for us to tell them what to do.
This is
So that's
interesting.
my-
So
that's my
what,
thought.
after raising one of these 6 issues to the group, I've heard what I would consider pushback from Greg and you about having this kind of philosophical discussion, that neither one of you were talking about how to have more timely funding for long-needed capital projects. Both of you are saying, we don't want to discuss this kind of idea. It's not appropriate as the finance committee. And to me, if you, I mean, Greg, you don't all have the benefit of a letter that Greg shared with you, but he pulled some language about what a finance committee does from a source, the Association of Town Finance Committees. And in it says, in effect, the local finance committee has the same role as the House Ways and Means Committee. And that makes me, those are people who get the budgets and decide, yeah, we're paying that. Yeah, no, we're not paying that. No, you gotta keep working on that. Yes, that works.
But
And
basically,
we keep saying, we keep being given capital improvement propositions that we cannot decline. Because there must fix.
Rich, it comes down to, unfortunately, there are projects that come before the CIC committee that we have turned down for many different reasons. Okay? The thing is, it's a difference between the budget and what we can levy for taxes to pay the bills. Okay? And how much do we want to levy? And right now, we usually levy almost to the max. And there's good reason for that. But if you don't have excess levy, you can't do this.
But we often do, and we often use all of that to fund capital
We do
projects.
because we have, because we access.
And that if Natalie, we all just sit here and applauded Natalie Blaze for coming in here and bringing us $25,000 for using her position, her legislative branch position, using her insider position to be able to come here and bring us 25 grand for a roof. Except when we want to, as people who are volunteering, caring, putting in free time, when we want to put forward an idea that we think will bring benefit or that has been brought to us from townspeople, I think we can include that in our thinking. And to not do is to pass the buck and to not be accountable, to blame it on the weather, to blame it on our size, to blame it on history.
I don't think we're doing that. We're not doing that. The thing is, there's a difference between what a finance committee does and the power of the finance committee.
That is
Just
a
like
discussion to
the
have. I
CIC
also
committee.
wanna talk about the
Only thing the CIC committee can do when these projects come before us, say yes or no, and recommend it to this board, to that board, and the town meeting. Then it's up to town meeting to say yes or no. It's not us. It's-
I think I hear what you're saying, Fred, and what I would say is, why you see in front of you CIC requests that we must do are because they've already discounted all of the things that they'd like to do, okay? Because they could certainly come to us with a list, to the finance committee or the select board with a list of things we would like to do, but they know fiscally that there is only a certain amount of money, and so there are times when then there are projects brought to us that, yeah, you could go either way, you could do this or this. Okay, you don't have to do this, but oftentimes they're brought to us, and that's why the discussion earlier on about how we look at things like capital and how we try to plan for it to be more proactive are things that I think belong with a CIC. I sat on a finance committee at a school, and I always felt that far too much authority was given to the finance committee. When people wanted to do something related to sports, they would go to the finance committee. I said, well, why are you coming to the finance committee? Well, you handle all the money. No, we carefully allocate the money that we have available to us. You should go to curriculum to see that this fits the programmatic needs of the district, and then let them request it. And that's kind of what this committee does, is it looks at what other departments are asking for. I understand everybody has their thoughts, and I don't disagree with many of the things you had here. But there's a balance there, And I think it's trying to be a bit more, letting other committees do the work of the planning and of the organization, and let the town administrator and those committees kind of pull things together, and then come to finance and talk about it, then ask the questions, well, why did it take this long? What else could we do? And how to be more responsible makes sense. And how much do we fund? And one could argue many different ways. One could argue we underfund underfund building maintenance and overfund parks and recreation. One could argue we overfund maintenance and underfund parks and recreation. It's a balance, and that's what the committees try to bring, and those are the decisions about where the funding should be that make a difference, I think, not necessarily the individual projects. So if that makes sense, I'm not sure I got my point across or not, but, sorry.
So, Mr. Whitmer, what would you like to do to conclude this discussion for tonight?
I'd like to make a motion that the Finance Committee do some work to prepare policy development guidelines around urban homesteading projects that give away land without requiring 10% public space. I'm looking for us to look into that, this being a financial idea that we're giving away taxable land, and that that contract then has an impact on the town revenue. So that's impacting finance. That's the logic. So that we're saying that instead of giving that, that's great what's happening, but instead of giving it away clear, then we make a that we do some homework, prepare a recommendation for the select board that future urban homesteading proposal land giveaways, which has worked really well for the town, include a public space requirement.
Okay, so that's a pretty long motion
Thank you.
that Mr. Garrison, I am
Yeah,
sure
whatever,
has
yeah.
struggled.
I want us to, I want us to do some work on that, is what I meant. Possibly it doesn't need to be a motion, but I want us to do some work on making that proposal.
All right, Mr. Ellis.
If I could, I mean, typically, when an RFP is issued, that RFP is conceptualized by the planning department with input from myself, and then potentially from other departments, buildings, or wherever it might be. It could be also with the Economic Development Industrial Corporation, which actually holds some of these properties, not the town, and it's their decision. To the extent that an RFP is released, it goes to the select board, and the select board looks at its characteristics. I don't know whether the specific question around a public space requirement and, associated with urban homesteading has been discussed previously. I think there are probably some projects where that would be realistic and feasible, and some where it would be potentially inappropriate and infeasible and would get in the way of redevelopment. So, just as the servant of the select board on some level, I think that I should let them speak for themselves, but they're the ones who really make the final decisions relative to the constitution of these products. And I can take this feedback immediately back to Walter, and we can talk about what that might look like. And I would be very open to hearing from you, so what might that look like, right? Because there are all different parcels, and oftentimes the real problem is that the parcels that we're selling are so distressed or are so bounded that there isn't enough space to do them and comply with zoning.
You could also trade your public space requirement, though. You could trade it to a separate.
And I think that this would be like a great conversation for us to have, and I would and you could bring a specific proposal to the select board.
So here's my proposal, is that, Steve, I feel like you, as the town administrator, have information about how to move forward with each of these ideas, and could talk outside of meeting time with Mr. Whitmer about ways forward before we return to these specific proposals in this kind of setting, where I think that there's sort of an order of things that needs to happen about who develops policies. And I continue to feel like the Finance Committee isn't really the genesis for most of these ideas. They are interesting ideas, and I think they're worth exploring. And so I think the next step to move them forward is for the town administrator to work with Mr. Whitmer to figure out what to do with them.
May I ask about that recommendation? Just that, am I working with Mr. Whitmer as a representative of the finance committee? Am I working with Mr. Ellis as a representative of the finance committee? Or what I was looking for tonight, I thought it was us. And I wanted to talk about these issues with our group so that I could see whether there was any alignment among us on these ideas, and that this was work that we wanted to do together, and then make recommendations to the select board or town administrator as appropriate.
I see value in what you're asking about. I don't see it as anywhere near what's the purview of the finance committee. I think that it's a product, I think the first person that belongs to having discussions with are actually the town planner.
Some of them.
Some of them.
That one specifically, yeah.
This particular one we're talking about right now. And then potentially boards that are under his auspices, you know, planning, for instance, or some other zoning type thing, and then potentially coming through Steve, and eventually to the select board, and maybe some sort of a guideline when we do urban homesteading. But I don't see any way, or shape, or form that this really belongs at a finance committee level, other than a great opinion and a great thought. And I like that. The same thing with public-private partnership. I think that it's a great concept. You know, I've endorsed doing something. I don't think we should own a single building, but that's a separate topic. I just think some of these they're great, and how much money we spend on parks, those are good, but we've spent a lot on parks. So, I mean, I think that there are places they belong, you know, like if you're advocating that Parks and Rec should spend more money, maybe Parks and Rec should be a focus that you should have talk with that group and talk to and see and look at
Talk with
the.
Parks and Rec, and you ask them if they want more money, they don't want more money, you know. And I didn't, this isn't the first door I've, brought this idea to.
I guess
There's a
I'm
reason
like-
why I'm here bringing
right.
these ideas here.
Okay, I understand, but those are the folks that really help shape what their departments and what their groups need.
It's an elected
Go
body.
on with
Yeah.
what
So
Rich
Mr.
just said
Hamel
is-
hasn't spoken yet. Can you go first?
Gonna be quiet.
Okay.
is that
Thank you.
with it about the homestead and this green space and stuff, it's already in the zoning bylaws.
Well, not necessarily.
It's not,
It's recommendations
It's
for
recommendation.
sub, and we just wrote those by,
you just finalize that.
we're changing it right now.
No. But the thing is that that type of situation is the planning department. It's the planning department.
That, looking at these various elements, these four elements, we spent a lot of time on the first one and lesser on the others. I think items 3 and 4 clearly are outside the finance committee's responsibility. The definition of priority of emergency preparedness is the responsibility of the emergency management director. Current funding levels for education in Montague, we have a dilemma here. There is more money requested than we have available. And some years ago, we tried to establish a balancing point, saying that if we were to give the schools more than we have been giving them, it has to come out of somewhere, which is the town. And we have so many unfilled needs in the town that we have to maintain some balance. As our revenue is improved, we have shared that with the schools, and I would expect we would continue to do that. This came up very briefly when we talked about the overlay surplus, if and when it occurs. But, and this is for some of you, this is going to be a very old tale I've told before. The school committee has 9 members that are elected generally. They have a budget subcommittee. They have a flourishing administration to say to them, we want to give you more money is highly unnecessary, I would say. They are interested in taking any money we can offer them, and they have been doing a good job in tailoring the requirements to what we can give them. We've published an affordable assessment to them, which protects both sides, and we've said this is as far as we can go, as far as we know. One thing that has come up, Karen Tonelli pointed out, is in some cases they've ended up with more money to spend because they've had more state aid than they expected. So I don't see that there is a role for us on your education item beyond probing, and as we have in the past, Joan Blyer and Mike Sullivan, what are you spending the money on? Is it, how critical is it? We are testing them the same way we do our town departments. But I don't think we want to get more deeply involved in that, even if it is a large portion of the town's budget. It's getting a lot of attention now, and I don't see that intruding ourselves into it is going to improve the process any more than intruding our activities into what the CIC does, when the CIC is making set very, very, very good report. These are areas of interest that we should continue to pay attention to, but I'm not sure they need more attention from us when we're not a policy-setting board. That's enough, I guess.
So I want to wrap this up for tonight. I want to make sure, Mr. Mangoni, that if you have any thoughts you want to add, you have a chance to speak. And same for you, Mr. Ballo.
I'm pretty much in agreement with the idea of what we do with policy. I kind of was going to put, and it was said, I think, at least 3 or 4 ways, the same thing, but if you have a car with flat tires and a bent fender, you're probably going to fix the flat tires so you can drive, and you'll worry about the fender when the money comes up. Sort of my analogy, but sort of why we get those things that have come to us that we have to do now. And then I would like to think that probably over the next few years that there'll be less of those sort of emergency projects, as it were, that we've been going through the last few years, mainly with roofs. And that it seems like, because we did discuss this over the last few years, about having a plan and looking at what these things are, and it seems like it's been implemented and is starting to flourish into something that we'll be able to see that information on a regular basis. So I think that things are moving in a good direction overall, but, it is, scrutinizing when the things that are presented to us are presented to us. And at that time, like, if you go to the Parks and Rec and they don't want more money, that's the end of that conversation, really. I don't know what else you would do, other than maybe potential suggestion or whatever a particular department may be looking at an idea for expansion. But those are personal conversations and not, I don't think, table discussions here on it.
That's interesting. So may I just very briefly, thank you, Jen, thank you, everyone. So these are all really important values for me. So I volunteered for this committee because I believe that we can be part of affecting positive change through these ideas, through finance committee, legal finance committee activity. These are not, if you look at the way other towns, other finance, I hate to do this because I hate it when when anyone else in the room does it, but finance committees don't operate just one way. Any of these ideas could be embraced and worked on together.
So I guess my observation is that it doesn't appear that this finance committee is interested in spending its money. It seems like that's the conclusion.
We still have a motion.
Withdrawn.
Okay.
So I want to pass over the next item on the agenda, which is my own. We do not need to talk about that today. And so that brings us to Ms. Olson's report. And I only gave you 5 minutes, but then when I saw what was in the report, I felt like you might need more than that.
No, I can do it in 3.
I believe it too.
He sent me the group notes.
Okay. Most of this has to do with the last page on your handout. I do, however, have 2 additional handouts that if you would like to each take one of each and pass them around real quickly while I start, so we can get this party rolling. So closing of 2019, everything went well, except that we have an unusually high number of unpaid bills this year. For a variety of weird reasons, the people that were incurring the expenses were not telling the department heads or the appropriate staff that those bills were being incurred, so when it came to the end of the year, we knew nothing about them. And then they came forward, which is why on the special town meeting agenda, or the special town meeting warrant, there are 2 articles for unpaid bills. One is a combination of several smaller bills from several departments that will be identified. The biggest one is a separate article for the sewer, and that's because Irving never billed the last 3 quarters of the assessment, and they didn't bother to let us know, or we didn't realize it until after things had already closed out. So that's pretty much the closing. The free cash item, that's what the 2 things I'm sending you around. One of them is actually the calculation of how free cash and retained earnings are calculated. That's usually of interest to people. The second sheet is the surpluses, basically, of kind of what comes up, what makes up the undesignated fund balance, which then becomes part of free cash. So it's a comparison of budget and actual basically expenses, how much unencumbered expenses were turned into free cash, and how much revenue was achieved in excess of the budget that's also gone to free cash. You'll notice that those 2 numbers combined make up almost the entirety of the certified free cash for the town. Then on to that last page that's on your, sorry.
I filled up too quickly. I was with you when you talked about the makeup of free cash, and you went and the unpaid bills, and what came after that?
Then I was going back to the second handout, which is 2-sided. One side perhaps shows that the unspent expenditures that kind of flowed into free cash. The other side shows the unbudgeted revenues that flowed into free cash.
Gotcha.
Then on the last page, it's pretty much things that you need to be thinking about in terms of what to do with those balances. And finally, I want to point out that, well, it was mentioned earlier, something, I think I heard someone say something about appropriating the overlay surplus or overlay reserve at the fall town meeting. That's not going to happen because you guys would have to have another meeting in order to make that decision. So this stuff is all going to happen in the future. You don't have to worry about it right now, but plenty of stuff to think about. The other thing that I thought was going to be alluded to in an earlier article was the annual discussion on tax and the levy limit. So your packet also includes information from past meetings, discussions that you've had about that, so you can have that handy when you do start that discussion at a later point. And that concludes my report.
So, Carolyn, are there any decisions that we need to make soon?
Yes, at your next meeting on the 11th, you'll have the special town meeting warrant to look at and make recommendations on. And probably after that, you're gonna start wanting to think about the decision to levy to the limit, which is actually the selectmen's decision, but I know the finance committee would certainly want to weigh in on a recommendation to that.
So you're not going to be here at our next meeting?
Correct. But I will make sure that you have the warrant motions in plenty of time.
And I'll be here.
And Steve will be here, he can handle it.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Olson?
The tax revenue, that's 208, less than, is that just something that kind of ebbs and flows, or?
That's kind of standard. I mean, you're always getting people that don't pay their taxes on time and end up being taxed and whatever, but you also have revenues that are coming in from previous years. You know, so that's pretty standard.
Okay, yeah.
Any indication that unpaid taxes are getting higher?
No, I don't think so.
I
I mean, I'm not really the first person to ask about it, but I don't
Yeah.
recall seeing anything weird.
The treasurer has noted to me within the last year that the number of cases actually going to tax title is decreased pretty sharply over the last couple of years. I think their office does an excellent job of communication, of trying to set up plans for people when they are struggling and et cetera. But we can all acknowledge that the sewer bills were, in particular, more burdensome last year. We're pleased that this year we are only going to experience a 1% increase after last year's very substantial increase that was voted by the select board on Monday, by the way.
Thank you.
Don't just like us, thank the folks at wastewater and Steve.
I know,
Yeah.
I know.
Town staff.
Yeah, ours, Jim,
A lot, yeah.
a lot.
I think
We still want-
the headline that wasn't necessarily discussed is just that, the free cash is a greater sum than it is in most years. That should provide some additional flexibility going into this current year. And it's all part of that earlier discussion about how it's used.
All right. So we just have some routine business. Maybe the select board doesn't want to stick around for the minute approval and stuff.
We'll hang in there, I don't care.
All right. So we have minutes from our last meeting.
I'll second.
Favor?
Would you like to announce that the select board is going to have its optional
Meeting on Monday.
Monday, August 26th, in this room at 7 p.m. It was originally identified as tentative on the summer calendar, and
It's a pretty short agenda though, right?
it's reasonably brief, I think.
Reasonably.
Yes.
Okay.
It's such a way with
Pe-
words.
People have till tomorrow at 1.
All right, so we have some minutes from our meeting of July 10th. Mr. Handel took the minutes. I made some suggestions. What's in your packet are the
Thank you, guys.
minutes as they stand currently.
No, that's corrected.
As corrected, like the minutes that are in your packet are the minutes that we are
Voting on.
voting to approve.
Right, and they include the amendments that Jen gave me, and I also
Motion to
emailed
approve
everyone.
minutes as amended.
Any discussion? Anybody want to talk about those minutes? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
And Mr. Garrison has been taking the minutes for tonight. I put this on here because I wasn't sure that you were gonna be here next week, Greg, or the next meeting on September 11th.
I should be.
So I want to say that I think that if members of the committee are taking the minutes now, we really can't share amendments and suggestions back and forth in between meetings. We have to either funnel them through somebody who's not on the committee, or we have to make the amendments in a public meeting. So I think, I sent my corrections to Carolyn, and Mr. Garrison can send us a draft.
Yep.
But we can't all send him suggestions for how to change it and then have him reconcile that, because it's like having a discussion with all of us
You're gonna
outside
send
of our
everything to
meeting.
you, Carolyn?
Yes, they'll send everything to me. I'll do a revised one to the best of my ability and send that out again before I won't be able to do it for the next meeting because I won't be here, but, if
I
I
can
get
send them
stuff
out. You can send them to me or to
Okay.
Greg, and we can send them out if
Okay.
you'll do the reconciliation. That would be awesome.
Right.
And we need to decide on clerks for upcoming meetings. So the big agenda item for our next meeting is reviewing the special town meeting warrant, so that means that there will be votes and some discussion. And then after that, we're gonna have a meeting where one item on the agenda is a presentation about the affordable assessment. That's really kind of an educational opportunity for us to review why we do it that way, how it's been working, whether there are things that could or should be adjusted. And then I'm gonna propose that we meet twice in October, twice in November, and twice in December. So, how do you guys wanna proceed with the minutes? Shall we
Rotate.
just rotate, and if you aren't here on the day that you signed up for, we'll go to the next person on the list? So John's already taken his turn, Greg's already taken his turn.
I'm probably not gonna be able to be here next week, but I will be the following week. I will volunteer for that week.
Great.
25th?
Yeah.
What's
The 11th is the one after that.
No, the
So
11th's the next
The
one.
next one is the 11th, and then the one after that is the 25th.
The 25th is.
Which one would you like?
September.
Yeah.
Oh,
September.
that didn't make any sense.
Yeah,
either.
we're skipping a couple weeks.
No way I can be here August 11th, man.
I've been in renovation
That ship
mode,
sailed.
so my brain is fried, so I'm sorry.
How about, could I send a sign-up sheet around afterwards? This seems like it's
Sure.
When's the next meeting, 11th,
the 11th.
August? September.
September.
I'm going to propose that our next CIC meeting be on the 25th, because I have union negotiations on the 11th. Unless you guys,
I
can go on
shared the dates that I had in mind
I've
with
got that.
Josh, so that he could try and sync you.
oh, I'm sorry, man.
I just think,
I didn't mean to overstep.
it's okay, I'm just totally used to it.
it.
I'm wicked overbearing.
How are you?
So what I'm gonna do is,
Apparently.
I'm gonna send you a message that says, here are the dates of upcoming meetings, we're gonna sign up. Chris is gonna take one of the next ones.
Yeah.
That's great. Other than, like, so we had a lot of discussion today. I captured a lot of information about things that people would like to talk about in the future. We also have things penciled in, and we have a list of things for future agendas. So I don't want to repeat any of those things, but do people have things that have occurred to them or come up that they would like to request be put on a future agenda that we haven't already discussed? We do have a lot on our plates for the fall already, but. Okay. Topics not anticipated within 48 hours. I have one, which is that the superintendent from Gil Montague sent a message asking if people who have been attending his civic leaders meetings would like to have another meeting.
When?
And the date that he proposed is September 17th. I am going to write back to that group and let them know that we are planning to have Mr. Naughton come and do a presentation about the affordable assessment, and it's gonna be sort of a reprise of the one that he did for the civic leaders 2 years ago, but updated. So the date hasn't been set, but I wanted to announce it here, and also to get a sense of whether we were going to have enough finance committee members there that we would need to post it as a finance committee meeting.
I'll probably be there. Greg, you may need
I know Rich and I both plan to attend. And did you say Michael's going to attend on the 7th, Mike Naughton's going to attend on the 17th? Because he told me he couldn't be there on the 17th.
No, Mike Naughton's gonna come to our meeting
Oh.
on the 25th.
Awesome.
Yeah, he won't. All right, that's all I got. Anybody?
7 o'clock or 7:30?
I'll let-
6:30 to 8:30 typically, I think, is those, if they stick with their precedent.
The date hasn't been finalized yet.
Yeah. I just wanted you to know, and it actually relates to that, I'm anticipating on Monday, announcing that we're looking for representatives of the school regionalization committee. These representatives are appointed by the moderator. There are three total, one of whom needs to be a school committee member. So I sent a note to the moderator today, as well as to Jane Oakes on the school committee, making a suggested process and noting that I think that we will kind of begin to roll out our request for applications for that next Monday. So this is just such an invested and engaged group, I figured I should make note of that to you. If I could be allowed one other indulgence, I just want everyone to know that the town received a community development block grant this year. These are competitive for us, they're not just granted. $612,000 will flow to the town. The vast majority of that will be devoted to a renovation, a complete renovation of Spinner Park in our downtown. The balance of that is going to be distributed, approximately $80,000 to four competitively bid social service agency program applicants. And so there's still some I's and T's to dot and cross, but we're really looking forward to being able to realize the support for those particular human service agencies. and for renovating that park.
Give Walter a pat on the back.
Absolutely. And we have to thank our friends at the Franklin Regional Housing Authority
Yep.
as they really lead our effort, and their budget is a major portion of that total budget. We pay approximately 23% in program management fees, and from the standpoint of expertise and capacity to file the grant applications, to manage the extremely bureaucratic process, and to provide oversight for all of those programs and projects, they do an outstanding job. That's why we get it every year, almost every year.
I was gonna ask him something about this other committee.
Okay.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Steve, this committee.
Of Pioneer Valley Regional and Peel Montague have